Welcome to Breaking Biases. If the last few seasons of Formula 1 are anything to go by, then you might not have been able to guess it, but the first unveiling of a team's car and livery for the season ahead used to be quite the event. In 1996, for example, Benetton marked the launch of their B196 with an unveiling in front of 15,000 fans in a packed ancient theatre in Sicily, only to be outdone the following season when McLaren acquired the services of pop princesses the Spice Girls to unveil their 1997 challenger, the MP412, which featured the switch from their long-standing red and white Marlboro livery to the silver and black West livery, which would become synonymous with Formula 1 in the late 90s and early 2000s. 10 years after their Spice Girls launch, McLaren then cemented their position of kings of the car launch when, in 2007, Fernando Alonso marked his first official public outing at his new team, debuting the MP4-22, featuring new rocket red Vodafone branding with a demonstration run around the streets of Valencia alongside his then rookie teammate Lewis Hamilton. However, recent years in Formula 1 have seen teams move away from the glitzy and glamorous spectacles that car launches and livery reveals used to be, instead predominantly opting for an uninspiring photo shoot featuring the new car and, occasionally, the drivers and other team personnel. Given this recent trend, you may have forgiven Formula 1 fans for becoming slightly less enthusiastic over the years when it comes to the unveiling of new cars and liveries. However, when it comes to 2024 in particular, there's been a slight elephant in the room, one that has dampened people's excitement and expectations even further about the upcoming liveries. Yep. Led by Mercedes-Benz with their 2023 challenger, the W14, last season saw Formula 1 cars adorning more and more sections of ungainly, unpainted carbon fibre in an effort to save weight and to find the elusive thousandths of a second that it takes to climb closer towards the front of the grid. Ironically, it was the 2023 pace setters, Red Bull, who largely chose to avoid the naked carbon fibre trend, instead making sure that their car was adorned with all the vibrancy and colour that people have come to love about the world's premier motorsport. With most teams continuing to push the envelope, however, and seeking to develop their cars within the sport's imposed weight limit restrictions, saving as much weight as possible by painting the cars as little as possible was a trend that sadly many expected to continue moving into the 2024 season. That being said, with all the car launches now complete, and the results maybe not being quite as bad as people were expecting, I will be ranking all 11, yes 11, 2024 Formula 1 car liveries from worst to best ahead of the upcoming season. So, without further ado, starting at the back of our grid, in 11th place, there was a lot of speculation leading up to the 2024 season surrounding the potential livery of the rebranded Sauber team. Officially registered as Stake F1 Team Kick Sauber until 2026 when the team will be rebranded again, this time into the Works Audi team. Many expected the 2024 Challenger would feature the colour green given the involvement of their sponsor, Kick, and, well, we certainly got a lot of green. The car also features a vast amount of the unpainted carbon fibre we discussed in the intro, leaving us with, in my mind at least, a pretty vulgar attempt at an updated Sauber livery. The overall design of the livery actually reminds me of some of the generic My Team templates on the recent F1 video games, and for my money, it just looks really tacky. We've seen green on Formula 1 cars before and it often looks amazing, but this shade of green, to me, it looks more akin to something you'd find in NASCAR or IndyCar, which is nothing against either of those series. I respect them both hugely, and I feel that that colour scheme that's found on this Sauber would actually work really well in either of those categories, but those two sports have a vastly different vibe and feel than Formula 1, and for me, this livery just doesn't quite fit the vibe and overall aesthetic that typically works in Formula 1. I think this shot here just shows how bad the unpainted carbon fibre looks and also how bad it blends with the bright green of the rest of the livery, and I'm sorry, but how many tacky Stake logos do they want to plaster on this thing? I actually find it quite sad to see a Formula One mainstay like Sauber have their image butchered like this, especially when under their Alfa Romeo guys in recent seasons they've actually had some incredible liveries, some of the best in the past 10 years in my mind. But sadly, with this new livery, they go straight to the back of the grid for my ranking. In 10th place, probably the first of many controversial takes on this list, but in many ways I think this Aston Martin livery represents everything wrong with the teams painting their cars as little as possible in order to save weight. At first glance the livery does look good, as it has done in recent years, but what should be an absolutely iconic livery is instead broken up by patches of paintless bodywork all over the car. The aerial shots are particularly damning, and whilst at first that might appear a slightly trivial complaint, don't forget that a lot of the F1 TV coverage features helicopter shots of the cars flying around the track. And it's in these moments that the AMR24 is going to look its ungainly worst. For me, an iconic brand such as Aston Martin, a car manufacturer famed for its gorgeous and elegant cars, shouldn't be represented in this way, regardless of how much weight they feel they need to save. Even so, I can see the logic of not painting much of the top of the car, but leaving the side pods half painted with the gorgeous British racing green just abruptly ending halfway down? No, not for me. For me that's unforgivable, and it's for that reason that the AMR24 finds itself in 10th place on the grid. In 9th place, the first of the two Alpine liveries is up next, and surprisingly, given its lonely spot in this ranking, there's actually so much that I like about this car. This design here, for example, on the exhaust section of the car is absolutely exquisite. The way they've combined the blue and the pink using the shape of the Alpine logo, absolute chef's kiss for me. I also really like the wheel covers. At first I thought they were a bit tacky, and I genuinely do prefer these to be black. I just think it makes the design look a lot slicker, but they've definitely grown on me, and of course it's always nice to see such an iconic motorsport brand in Castrol adorn any racing livery. However, I think it's the use of the blue on the nose of the car that just doesn't work. It doesn't pop in the way that it really needs to, and again, if we look closer, for me it's just more evidence of the fact that the naked carbon fibre just makes the car look unfinished, and it's such a lazy look in my opinion. Like the Aston, the lack of colour was even more evident in the aerial shots. If the car was actually painted black, then this would be right up there towards the top of this ranking for me. But again, the lack of paint just leaves such a sour taste in the mouth. It's very much a case of what if for me when it comes to the blue version of the Alpine livery, and as a result it finds itself quite low down in 9th place on my list. In 8th place, it should come as no surprise given their similarities, but it's the pink version of the Alpine livery that's up next, with the main reason being that the added pink found in this design, particularly in the nose section, makes this version of the livery stand out just that little bit more. Looking again at the exhaust section of the car, I think this might genuinely be one of my favourite features of any car on this list, especially with the driver's number in there. I mean, I know it was in the blue version of this livery as well, but just this photo in particular makes it look really classy. As with its twin brother though, it's the unpainted carbon fibre that lets this livery down and stops this car making the podium places. I would have rated it that highly if it was painted black. As mentioned, it's the added pink in this design that separates it from the blue version for me, and for that reason the pink Alpine qualifies one place higher in 8th. In 7th place, another controversial one here. I've seen a lot of people label this season's Mercedes as the best looking livery on the entire grid, and I'm sorry, but I just don't see it. For me, my instant thought when I saw this car was that it looks an awful lot like the Force India livery of 2015 and 16, which in itself isn't a bad livery at all, but I just remember it being a bit of a uninspiring downgrade on their iconic white, green and orange liveries, so being reminded of it again now with this year's Mercedes just makes me feel like it looks a little bit dull, especially compared to some of Mercedes' previous F1 entries. Overall though, I do think this is actually quite a tidy design. I mean, yes, there are some bits that could have been done better. The 3-point stars towards the rear of the car, for example, I think have looked better on previous Mercedes cars, and for me, the Petronas logo just doesn't look right, not being surrounded by its iconic green backdrop. Having said that, a big plus point for me is the red Ineos airbox. I don't know how else to describe it other than it feels as though it acts as a nice bookend for the car. A standout airbox is a feature that I've noticed I really like on a number of F1 cars actually. I think the biggest reason why this livery doesn't rank higher for me though is the fact that it doesn't quite know what it wants to be. For those of you who don't know, one purported origin story of Mercedes-Benz's iconic Silver Arrows livery is that, similar to last season, the original paint of Mercedes' race cars in the 1930s was stripped away to save weight, revealing underneath bare metal and thus creating the world famous Silver Arrows livery and moniker. As mentioned previously, Mercedes-Benz essentially did the same thing in Formula 1 last season, with the strip paint now revealing black carbon fibre as opposed to the polished metal of yesteryear. It's this history of saving weight via getting rid of paint that will always allow me to give Mercedes-Benz a pass on any exposed carbon fibre livery, and whilst this year it would appear that they've actually chose to paint the car black and not have much exposed carbon fibre at all, if you're going to go with a black livery, then go all in. Go full black, strip to the carbon, that's fine. And I know that in previous seasons they've also gone with the painted black BLM liveries, and I like and respect them too, those liveries. But either go with the black livery or go with your historic Silver Arrows livery, but just don't create something that tries to do both. Whilst the overall resulting livery is respectable, it's this clash between two styles that I think just doesn't work as a concept, and for that reason the Mercedes-Benz livery finds itself in the lower midfield of my Formula 1 livery rankings. In 6th place, another rebranded outfit for the 2024 season. What last season was AlphaTauri, now christened the Visa Cash App RBF1 team, with what might be the worst team name in Formula 1 history, the Racing Bulls livery is one that's actually really grown on me since its release. The VC ARB01's livery clearly draws inspiration from its popular ancestor, the Toro Rosso STR12, although for my money this year's iteration of the livery is clearly a far worse imitation of the original. As a side note, I know a lot of people really love the Red Bull Cola livery, however I for one always preferred the original Toro Rosso livery, particularly the 2008 iteration, which, in my opinion at least, is one of the greatest Formula 1 liveries of all time, but I digress. I think this livery is a case of benefits from the colours, maybe more specifically benefits from the lack of colours of its competitors. The colours here work really well though, but the overall design potentially less so in my opinion. This white section at the front, for example, looks a bit slapped on, and this straight edge here isn't particularly flattering. That being said, it is nice to see the Red Bull logo back where it belongs astride the engine cover. Like I say, this design has actually really grown on me since it was first released. I think from certain angles it actually looks really quite good, although I just cannot forgive the person who signed off on these Cash App logos not being symmetrical. It really, really annoys me. I don't know why he would do that. That being said, this is a solid livery and worthy of its 6th place in my rankings. In 5th position, I haven't seen much love for this McLaren livery on social media, but in my opinion this is a really clean, crisp and solid entry from the Woking based outfit. Obviously, the first thing people are going to call me out on is the amount of unpainted carbon fibre that I have been so critical of with previous entries on this list. However, I think the differences here are twofold. Unlike the Alpine, for example, there is far more colour on the McLaren, and the bright papaya orange contrasts much better against the black carbon compared to the blue and even the pink of the Alpines, to the point where I just don't feel as short-changed. I also feel that this is an incredibly well balanced livery, containing sections of colour all the way from front to the rear wing throughout the car. Yes, the carbon fibre is still an issue, but for me there's enough colour here to somewhat compensate for it. The presence of the carbon fibre on the McLaren, whilst it's not ideal, it doesn't offend me, and I actually think this livery will look really good when it's on track. I'd also just like to give a shout out to the genius who created the design for the Google Chrome wheel covers. I know these have been present on the McLaren for a while, but I really do think they are an excellent feature and something that adds a unique finishing touch to a really solid livery. Hence the reason why the McLaren makes it into P5 on my rankings. In fourth place, and just missing out on the podium places, this is another one I'm going to get a lot of hate for, and another one that I've seen a lot of love for online. What I would say is that I think the Ferrari SF24 is a good looking livery with some faults. The exposed carbon fibre on the Ferrari is actually done much more tastefully than the Aston Martin, for example. Whilst I'd still prefer it wasn't there, I actually feel like they've done a solid job in incorporating it into the overall design of the livery, with there being enough colour in enough of the right places for things not to look ugly, in my opinion. I mentioned this livery having some faults, and for me that's certainly the case, the biggest being that this car doesn't quite feel as balanced as it could do. When I think of some of the best looking Ferraris of all time, I think of the Vodafone and Marlboro livery from the mid-noughties, the black wings of the 80s, and even the livery from 2010. All of those liveries have a common formula. They're all balanced. It's white or black front and rear wings, and then red in the middle with maybe the odd section of white or black again. That's it. It's just balanced. With the SF24, there just seems to be a lot going on. The front and rear wings can't make their mind up what colour they want to be. I absolutely hate the red wheel covers, and I think the white and yellow stripes on the front of the tub have absolutely no business being there and just serve to break up the flow of the livery. With all that being said, you may be wondering why I've ranked this car as highly as I have, despite there being so many things about this livery that I don't like, and honestly, there's just something very retro and quite nostalgic about it. If I was designing a Ferrari livery, would I do it like this? No. But there's just something intangible about its design. This is going to be another unusual shout from me, but the best way I can describe this car is that I don't think it would look out of place on the French Riviera. Maybe its design is less corporate and more passion and soul than some of the other Ferraris that I mentioned earlier. I don't know. But what I do know is that the Ferrari SF24 just misses out on a place on my podium. In third place, even I'm beginning to think that some of my rankings won't make much sense to most people, but once again, hear me out. This Haas car obviously features a lot of unpainted carbon fibre, a characteristic that I've quite clearly gone on record as saying that I categorically do not like. And yet, I think it's the fact that Haas is an American team that means this works for me. The Haas VF24 just reminds me of a US stealth bomber, and to be honest, I absolutely love it. The carbon fibre is as obvious as it was on the Alpines or the Sauber, and yet it's as though it was always meant to be there. It's brash and it's brazen, it's Uncle Sam and the Star Spangled Banner, and I wouldn't change any of it. This is, of course, epitomised by the US flag being emblazoned on the nose cone. I love the wheel rims, I love the colours. I think it's a unique design and colour scheme that I can't recall ever seeing in Formula 1, and one that, in my opinion, will make this Haas car instantly recognisable for years to come. It's unapologetic, and I will unapologetically rank it as the third best livery on my list. In second place, and narrowly missing out on the top spot, when the first images of the new Red Bull surfaced a couple of days prior to its official unveiling, the collective groans of the Formula 1 community could be heard everywhere. Having by and large kept a very similar design year on year since their inception in 2005, I only really started to see complaints about it after they unveiled the first of their Camo Bull testing liveries in 2015. This and the subsequent camo testing liveries over the years, I feel, has given people a glimpse of what could be, and as a result, people have been looking for something different from Red Bull for a while now. Like I said, I do understand people's frustrations. However, looking at this livery in isolation, for me, it just works and always has done. Whilst I don't think this is the best iteration of this livery by any means, for my money it is still an absolute classic, a real modern day Marlboro McLaren, a design loved and revered by Formula One fans around the world, despite also seeing minimal changes in its design for the 20 years we saw it on the grid. Whilst the naked carbon fibre trend does appear to have finally been adopted by Red Bull, the dark blue paint on this car makes it almost indistinguishable. It's an incredibly well balanced design and always has been. The Mercedes style cannon exhaust does annoyingly obscure the iconic Red Bull logo, but I still absolutely love this livery and always will. Therefore, the Red Bull RB20 just narrowly misses out on claiming the top spot in my rankings. And finally, in first place. Since Williams first introduced their dark blue livery in 2022, year on year it's been growing more and more in my estimations. Last season's car was great, but this year I'm going to label as absolute perfection. From absolutely every angle, this car is just jaw-droppingly gorgeous. The combination of the navy blue, the royal blue, the black, finished off with the orange and white detailing, just creates such a unique design that is so professional in its execution. For me, one of the most important factors in making a good Formula One livery is the amalgamation of the sponsors, and it's the best liveries that manage to integrate them all seamlessly into the overall design, and Williams have certainly achieved that this season. I mentioned on the Mercedes that their airbox almost acts as a bookend for the entire design, and I believe that to be the case again with the Williams, with this genius Duracell battery design. I know it was on last season's design as well, but honestly, what a stroke of genius by whoever it was that designed it. I think the real finishing touch on this livery though is of course the iconic Gulf sponsorship, synonymous with motor racing in general. It's just such a pleasure to behold the Gulf logo again, and it really adds a sense of history and prestige to such a modern design. I genuinely can't find a fault with this livery. I think it is really something to behold. In my opinion, it's the best looking Williams since their collaboration with BMW in the early 2000s. I haven't seen much love for it online, and maybe it won't look as good once it actually hits the track, but for now, the Williams FW46 is without any question or shadow of a doubt the car that takes the top spot of my 2024 Formula One livery rankings. So there we have it, all 11 Formula One liveries ranked ahead of the upcoming season. Of course, we'll get a much better idea of how these cars look once they hit the track in pre-season testing in Bahrain, but for now, let me know your thoughts on my list, on the liveries, and let me know your rankings as well. I really would love to see them, and I always find it dead interesting how everyone's ranking is completely different, and no two people generally have the same ranking of the liveries. So yeah, drop it in the comment section below. Like this video if you've enjoyed it, and subscribe to the channel for more Formula One content throughout the season. Until next time, take care and have a great day.